being here, most importantly, the Sheriff and Attorney General Dave Yost. I anticipated that when the indictment was made public on Friday that we'd have a lot of questions about it. I was not wrong, and that's why I thought a press conference was the most appropriate way to move forward, as opposed to fielding questions one news organization at a time. So, this past Friday, October 21st, Donald Grombeck, former physician who practiced primarily in the village of Yellow Springs, was arrested upon a warrant that was issued pursuant to an indictment handed down by the Greene County Grand Jury. Please remember that what we are talking about are allegations, and Donald Grombeck is presumed to be not guilty. That being said, the indictment alleges that over a period of several years, Donald Grombeck sexually assaulted 15 women, all of whom were his patients. These alleged victims were seen either at Grombeck's primary office, which is located in Yellow Springs, or they were seen at Antioch College while Grombeck was providing medical services at the school. The indictment alleges that Grombeck's crimes include rape, sexual battery, gross sexual imposition, and sexual imposition. The indictment is the result of a year-long collaborative investigation that was initiated by the Greene County Sheriff's Office. Sheriff Scott Anger is here today. The Sheriff's Office was assisted in the investigation by agents of the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, which is an arm of the Ohio Attorney General's Office. Attorney General Dave Yost is also present. The investigation included investigators from the Ohio Medical Board as well. I cannot speak more highly of the law enforcement efforts in this case. In particular, Detective Warren Hensley of the Greene County Sheriff's Office and Special Agents Rick Ward and Perry Rosser of BCI. The state has filed a motion for no bond on Donald Grombeck. There is a hearing to be held on that motion on Thursday, October 27th at 1 p.m. in front of the Honorable Judge Michael Buckwalter. If there is anyone watching this press conference who has any additional information about criminal activity on the part of Donald Grombeck, or if you believe that you yourself have been victimized, please contact Detective Warren Hensley of the Greene County Sheriff's Office. That number is 937-562-4875. There are additional ways as well to report it, and with that, I'm going to turn the podium over to our Sheriff, Scott Anger.
Just reiterate the cooperation in this case. I don't think I've been in 38 years of law enforcement. I don't think I've seen a case over a course of a year that we had the multi-disciplines involved in the case to make it come to the point we're at with a 50-count indictment for this individual. Again, this spanned over 9 years. They had to go back with a lot of different agencies, both law enforcement and non-law enforcement. So I cannot say enough about BCI, David Yost's office, and everything that they've done. We've always had great cooperation, but we have had so much cooperation in this. The Ohio Medical Board, the State Pharmacy Board was involved, the Attorney General's Medicaid Fraud Unit was involved, and again, so many others. I watched them over the course of this year take out days of the week where they were doing nothing but working on this case. And again, I can't say just how much cooperation and so much talent and skill and persistence have went into getting us to where we're at here today. And again, Captain Kelly Edwards from our office as well, and Rick Ward and Mr. Rosser, and also Warren Hensley, what they've done in this case. Really, that's all I want to talk about right now is just the amount that's gone into this. I'm sure there's going to be more people come forward, as have been done since other media accounts that happened during this, and we'll be ready for that. We do have a portal on our website, Greene County Sheriff's Office website, for news flash. It has a place to go to if anybody has any more information about this case, or they can get a hold of Detective Warren Hensley for further information. This time I'd like to introduce our Attorney General from the state of Ohio, David Yost.
Thank you, Sheriff.
It's an honor to be here today in a supporting role in this. Make no mistake about it, this investigation was led and directed by Sheriff Anger and Prosecutor Hayes, BCI, both our special agents, special investigations unit, and our special victims unit were part of this investigation. We were very proud to play that supporting role because we were invited in. And that's the way it should be. Law enforcement is a local matter in Ohio. This case represents every woman's nightmare. A physician is someone that we all trust to act in our best interest, to be professional, to have a level of detachment. To turn medical treatment into a sexual assault is a incredibly graphic and brutal betrayal of trust. I'm pleased that Prosecutor Hayes and Sheriff Anger are able to bring this defendant to the bar of justice. Equally proud of the victims that came forward, the survivors that came forward. Patient one was a particularly courageous woman and actually tape recorded part of these acts, which will be, I think, compelling evidence when it's revealed in court. My heart goes out to her and all the other women who had to deal with these unthinkable crimes. So with that, I'm turn it back to Prosecutor Hayes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you again. Appreciate it. At this time, I will answer questions. However, I do want to remind everyone it is a pending criminal case. We are very limited in the information that we are able to provide, so we will answer questions that we are able to answer. So if anyone has questions.
The indictments seem to indicate right now a total of 15 alleged victims. Is that an accurate count right now?
That is correct.
Can you break down male, female? Are they all female? Talk about that just a little bit.
All of the victims in this case are women, and they are all patients of former Dr. Gombe.
And then, are you able to talk about whether some of these alleged attacks were occurring when the doctor was serving as the Antioch University's medical director, or whether it's strictly in his private practice? What do you know about that?
Well, as I indicated in my initial statement, the patients who are identified in the indictment, all of them were seen by then Dr. Grombek, either at his primary office, which is located in the village of Yellow Springs, or while he was providing medical services at Antioch College.
The state medical board seemed to indicate that they had maybe started hearing complaints or an investigation as far back as 2013. I see the furthest back that any of your indictments kind of ranges 2015. Is there something there that brought to their attention but wasn't something that you felt that you could charge?
Well, as you know, of course, that the medical board has a responsibility different than mine. Their responsibility is to make sure that physicians are properly licensed in the state, and if they violate their trust, as Mr. Grombek did in this case, and as the Attorney General pointed out, that they suffer those consequences. I have to decide an entirely different issue, which is whether or not he committed a crime. So during the course of, as I mentioned, a year-long investigation in conjunction with the Sheriff's Office and importantly BCI, we met with all of the victims in the case. We put the case together, and we made a determination that these are the charges upon which we were going to proceed.
You seem, as evidenced by all three of you that have spoken so far, you seem to believe that it is a very strong possibility there are more victims out there. Tell us why that is. I don't know if there are other victims. However, and not speaking about this case in particular, but in any case where we have an individual who is acting in a professional capacity and victimizes individuals who are in his care, all of you can imagine, and we've seen this in different parts of the country. You saw it in Michigan with Dr. Nasser. You see it in other places where individuals who are victims of crimes like these are reluctant to come forward, probably first and foremost because they don't know if they're the victim of a crime. And that's why we put out to the community through this press conference that if you were seen by Dr. Grombek and if you believe that you are a victim,
and we encourage you to come forward by contacting the Greene County Sheriff's Office.
You indicated you're going to ask for no bond. Tell me why your office feels like that's important.
Well, we believe that, well, as you know, bond is primarily to make sure that somebody shows up for trial. And I don't know if you know, the Supreme Court decided earlier this year that the court is not permitted to take public safety into account. Setting that aside, we do believe that Mr. Grombeck is a flight risk, unlike a lot of, former Dr. Grombeck is a flight risk. We believe that due to the fact that he was a physician, he is a person of resource, he's a person of means. I believe he still owns property in the county, and that is why we're asking the court for no bond.
If convicted, how many years in prison does former Dr. Grombeck face?
He faces over 80 years in prison if convicted on all the counts in the indictment, and 55 of those years would be mandatory.
And what age is he right now? Do we know?
I can tell you.
We can find it.
He was born in 1980.
Okay. During the investigation, we did see the search warrants being served at the office back in January by DCI and Greene County Sheriffs. Did you serve search warrants at other locations as well, and are you able to tell us where those were served?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Special Agent Rick Ward, and I would invite him and Sheriff's Detective Warren Hensley to come and answer this question with regard to the location and where search warrants were executed.
Physical search warrants were executed at the doctor's office, but there's been a lot of other search warrants for telephone, electronic search warrants, specific apps we knew the former doctor was using. So not so much physical search warrants, but definitely other search warrants were served.
Did not serve one then at any homes or residences?
No, sir.
You mentioned the apps that the former doctor was using. How much of these crimes were committed using those apps versus in person?
Yeah, I get this one, guys. I can only say that if you look at the indictment, we have alleged 50 counts of sexual offenses, and none of those sexual offenses can be committed through a telecommunications device.
But the apps were used to sort of facilitate or set up these crimes.
Like in any investigation, the law enforcement officers will conduct a thorough investigation, and they will follow any lead that they have to follow. And in this case, as you heard from the agents, it led them to certain electronic devices and certain apps.
So it could either be part of the crime, or it could just be a record. Those apps could just be a record that, in fact, that victim did have an appointment at a certain time with the doctor and confirming that kind of information.
Well, I don't want to get too far into the weeds on the evidence, so I hope I've been able to answer the question up to this point. Thank you.
Considering the years-long span of the alleged crimes, are there any other parties implicated in these crimes, or any charges anticipated to be brought against anyone else?
I can only tell you that up to this point, the only person charged in regard to any of these offenses is Donald Grombeck.
And then, are there any anticipated drug-related charges?
The indictment as it presently exists are the charges that we will be proceeding forward with.
I guess following up on that, the genesis of the investigation, patient complaints, employee complaints, a combination, can you characterize those?
I'm going to turn that over to Detective Warren Hensley, and if you could just talk just how the investigation came to light in the first place, that's all.
The investigation came to light due to patients and employees coming and reporting to the sheriff's office.
All right, thank you, Detective. Anything else?
Does the sheriff's office know of any prior complaints to local police departments that police department?
That is a subject that we're not going to touch upon here today.
I guess the last thing maybe for
Well, I think that the Attorney General would like to say something on a related subject, but does anyone have any other questions related to the indictment?
Just, if you or the Attorney General could just talk about what a patient that goes to a doctor should be able to expect, or should be able to, in other words, it's obviously a doctor-patient relationship is going to possibly, if you're reporting a problem, involve some touching, but the doctor should be able to do all that without inappropriate touching. Can you kind of talk about that subject?
I am not going to talk about that subject. I think that's getting, there's two things. One, it asks me to get into the evidence of the case, which I'm not going to do. And the second is it also requires me to speculate a little bit about doctor-patient relationships in general.
I think maybe if I could clarify your question a little bit. Are there warning signs that patients should look out for when they go to the doctor to make sure that these crimes do not happen to them?
Again, I'm not going to touch on that at this time. Any other questions? I will tell you generally, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, but especially if you're in that sort of a setting, if something doesn't feel right, then it's probably not right, and you should say something about it. All right, I believe I'm going to turn it over to Attorney General Yost. Go ahead, sir. Thank you.
I just want to add one thing about State Issue 1, which will be on the ballot on August 8th. This fact pattern represents one of the reasons why this issue is up. Now, as the prosecutor had mentioned, there is a provision in state law that allows a prosecutor to have a no bond request and for the person to simply be held without bond. Here's the challenge. That requires a full due process hearing where witnesses can be called and cross-examined. Now, in this case, I don't think it's going to be necessary because of the weight of the evidence for the prosecutor to have to call any of the victims. But that's a decision he has to make. In any event, think about if we had a little bit less of an investigatory record here, if we had a little bit less weight of evidence, you might be forced to bring the victims in themselves in order to make your case about not being held without bond. I can't imagine asking one of the survivors of these crimes to be in open court, subject to cross-examination by defense counsel, and having to relive that and that memory in the presence of the person that committed these acts. Now, they're going to have to do that at trial already. Having to do this for a second time on a bond hearing so soon after the indictment is a good illustration of why the judge should have the ability to exercise discretion according to the record in each case and not be bound by the rule that was announced by the Supreme Court in DuBose versus McGuffey. So, thank you. Yeah.
That statement basically means you support issue 1?
I do, but more importantly, it explains the rationale behind State Issue 1, which would overrule with a very simple constitutional amendment, that case, DuBose versus McGuffey, handed down January of this year. All it does is add a provision to the Constitution that says a judge shall consider public safety among all of the other things when they're setting a bail. Thank you.